What's up, everybody? Justin here. As you might be able to tell, this podcast now has a new name. We were originally just another podcast, but long story short, I have opted to rebrand it and relaunch it in a sense as the Maine State of Mind with your host, Justin Soderberg. It will be similar to the old podcast, to the podcast we're doing, but we're going to probably end up focusing a lot more on Maine based items with the select guests from out of state, New England, across the country, across the globe. So things won't change that much. I just thought this is a more of a poignant name and a better name for the podcast and a better name going forward. So themainstateofmind.com, at the Maine State of Mind on a lot of places. Find us, subscribe on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, all the places. Things are changing. You would see it might be just another podcast in some places, in Maine State of Mind and in other places. We're working on that right now. But to this episode, we have Galactic Comics owner and proprietor Paul Eaton back to do another top 10 list for the poll list. This week we talked the comic book story arcs that are our favorite. So we did our top 10 list back and forth and discussed a little bit about it on each one. Mostly Marvel for me, as normal. And Paul had some ones to throw in there that were kind of different, which is kind of cool. So we really enjoyed doing this podcast. I really enjoyed doing it as a whole for all of you. And thank you for listening. So I hope you enjoyed the Maine State of Minds, the poll list with Galactic Comics owner Paul Eaton here now. Enjoy. How's it going, Paul?
Good. How's it going, Justin?
That's a long time no see,
man.
It's so funny because we do these. So I do most of mine on Mondays, and we do this ones on Thursday nights. A little bit slower night for you at the shop. You close a
Yep.
little early. We get this done. So it's kind of funny because I consistently can say, "Hey, I saw you last night," because I'm
Yeah,
at your shop every Wednesday. So
it's our easy opening line. Like, oh,
and
hey.
last night you're like, "See you tomorrow night," and so it's like it is kind of funny because I was mentioning to a coworker of mine, Colton, who was at your shop last night.
Yeah.
It was I kept on saying, "Oh my god, I can't believe I saw you at the comic book shop," because I never see people that I am friends with or know at the comic book shop, unless it's Will, which I met through comic books. That's different, but or
Yeah,
Jay.
most sort doesn't count because
No,
exactly.
but we are here to talk comic books again. One of our favorite
Imagine
subjects to
that.
talk. It's crazy. I
Yeah.
love about the podcast and doing these episodes is that there's so much crazy shit going on in the world that I love to be able to just disconnect from that and talk things that are not real, that are
Yeah.
real in the aspect that you can read them, but they're not real and they're not based on true stories. And so, I like this time we've had a conversation and kind of an argument or disagreements or agreements, but not have to be like political or, religious or
Yep.
whatever. It's just the idea that we could talk fake
All the world
things
views.
and talk and argue over things that don't really matter. So
And
even
hopefully
though we
over
don't
beer.
usually argue, but what are you drinking there? Little Way Life?
I've got this is
I got the it's hard to see because my light, but I got the anniversary.
yeah.
This is a collaboration beer.
Yes, I had that. It was very good. I love this. I think this is my favorite regular OBC right here.
It's we got the sample, and I'll have to bring it in for you to see the printed cans. We're gonna go to full on printed cans of those ones.
Ooh.
It's gonna have the orange. It's gonna be full on instead of a label on it, which is pretty cool.
That's
Those will be
cool.
coming in a
Definitely.
couple months. Yeah. Okay,
Nice.
so we are doing comic books again tonight, which is a top 10 list, this is what we normally do. We do top 10 lists on comic book related things. We are going to do story arcs slash comic book events slash storylines, if you want to give it a broader thing. Story arcs is the easiest way to say it, or comic book events. But it's really anything that is a consistent thing, something that they used to do very rarely in comic books back in the day, back in the 50s, 60s, and things like that.
They were
It
almost
was
like one shots then, or maybe
yes.
a 1-2 part story, and that was it.
And now they're getting, I mean, there was some in the early 90s, there's some in the 80s and so on, but it's basically more nowadays to really sell comic books, let's be honest. Like the idea that if a storyline goes between multiple titles or has a separate mini series, what are you going to do as a comic book fan? You have to buy all of them.
You gotta
And
get the whole thing.
So right now, big one, and it's probably not making either of our list because it's too new. But King in Black in the Marvel universe
Yep.
is definitely one that's come out. They just did War of the Realms. They've done Empire. Those are all newer ones.
Yep.
Ours can stretch from whatever and across any comic book creation, whether it be Marvel, DC, Image, IDW, so on and so forth. As you can probably tell, anybody who's listened to this podcast before, mine are mostly going to be Marvel. That's not hiding anything and that's not giving anything away. That's just how it is.
Didn't
But
actually count
just
mine.
so to give everybody an idea of how we do these things, again, just to
I got
start
five.
it all off, is I'll read my 10 through 6 right in a row. Paul will then read his 10 through 6 right in a row. And then I'll do my 5, his 5, back and forth between all the way to get to number 1. We made the rule on the second one of these that if you have one in your top 10 that I mentioned earlier or you mentioned earlier, we don't say anything until the very end so that it doesn't
Yep.
it be on the list. Um, spoiler, get a little spoiler note. We may give away something in these stories if you haven't read them. There's not much I can do about that. This is story arcs.
Kind of hard to not
If
get
you want
into
to
some.
not spoil anything, read every single comic book event or storyline in the history of man. No, read the biggest popular ones because I mean, honestly, we're picking our favorites, so likely they're going to be some ones that are popular that's going on right
Yeah.
now. And also, I don't think with comic books we can give away enough. If that makes any sense, like I feel like a movie is so short
Right.
and it's so I don't know they make them so you want the next one. I don't. It's hard to explain how it is. It's different in comic books. So if you give a little bit away, it's still worth reading it. I mean, how many times have you read some of these stories?
I think almost all of these I've read multiple times.
Yeah, so it's like I've been reading like when we were getting ready for this, I read a couple of these. It's like, oh yeah, I missed this. And it's like
Yeah.
if I can't decide what to read, if I buy some comic books at your shop that I'm not really into right away, like I don't have a calling to read those, I'll
Mm.
pop in some of these. So it's like it's I do have the Marvel Unlimited as well, so because I own a lot of these comic books in physical
Yep.
copies, but a lot of times it's just easy to have them all in order, click the digital
Grab
copy,
it.
read it, and so
Go.
on.
Yep.
But, which is support your local comic book shop, but it also is worth it
Please.
if you're really into reading a
Yeah.
lot and you don't know what you want to read or you don't know what you want to buy. I will say giving it a shot in the digital, if you're big into Marvel, the Marvel Unlimited, it doesn't
Digital's
help
nice
you.
too if you're laying in bed and it's night and you're using a tablet. And
Yeah.
yep. I read. I bet I only read 10% digital, but I
Yeah.
still read digital too.
Yeah, it's like there are the worst part about it is you have to subscribe to either multiple services or buy individual. You can't like they don't Marvel does the digital codes, but like there's
Yep.
some companies like IDW. If you want to read the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, you need to read it or in physical copy or also buy the digital copy. So it's
Mm.
not worth it for most. But if you're like, oh, I don't know, I want to read Amazing Fantasy 15, you can't buy Amazing Fantasy 15. If you did, you're not going to read it.
God no. I hope
So
not.
so then you pop in, you turn on Unlimited, you go to Amazing Fantasy
Yeah.
15, read about Spider-Man, and that's what's cool about those things too. So I've done that. I gave it to my brother who's just getting back into comic books. I gave him a guest subscription for Christmas. He lives in Connecticut, so he wouldn't be shopping at your shop anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he's like so he's been reading into some of those things. He's like, okay, this will get me back into comics. Well, then he'll go out and buy physical copies of comic books, which is cool.
Yeah. You start falling in love with something, or you enjoy it, and you're like, you know what, I need this anyways.
And they
I've
have
caught a
reading
couple of them.
lists. I mean, there's all kind of cool things on there, but
I've got a few where I read it digitally, or I started digitally, and go, I have to stop because I have to have this in trade.
yeah,
And that's I collect trades. I think we probably mentioned that in the
yes.
past, but I have to have the trade of this because I want it on my shelf in my collection. I can't. So it's a good way to
Trade's how I
start.
read The
Even if you
Walking
want to
Dead.
test it.
Trade
Yep.
paperbacks is how I started Walking Dead. Not even the compendiums. I bought all the volumes,
Individual.
individual
Yep.
volumes, and I had that, and so that's how I read that for the longest time. Was doing the trade paperbacks as well. So, and a lot of these are available in trade paperbacks to give you a little bit of any of these storylines, the mini
Yep.
series that goes along with it. A lot of like Marvel, for an example, does a lot that nowadays. Like with Empire, there's like Empire 1 through
Mm.
whatever, as well
Yep.
as it crossed over to different covers of different groups like Avengers and all that X
Oh,
Men.
King in Black hit almost everything. It seems like.
And it seemed like they weren't going to, and then they saw how like I don't know, it seemed like that. It was like they slowly released a couple titles, and bam, everything was King in Black. I'm like, geez, it was like even if they didn't have anything to do with King in Black, it was like if we throw the little logo on there, someone will buy it.
Just tag it on the side.
But yeah, but most of these like the mini series that goes along with it that goes like in parallel to the actual like comic book events are
Yep.
usually available in trade paperback as well. So I think we should get started. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so I'll go through 10 through 6 of my favorite comic book story arcs, storylines, yada, yada, yada. Number
Yep.
10, Marvel Comics Siege, which is Norman Osborn takes over and becomes the basically is a villain, but also becomes the hero in a sense. Again, not to give it too much away, but he uh, basically the government tells him he's in charge instead of the Avengers and so on. It's at the end of it's after like a couple. I don't want to bring them up anymore. Of those I'll mention it when we get to it because there's other ones that may potentially be on my
Yeah,
list. But
it's
it
a good
is a
call.
follow up to another couple of story arcs that is pretty cool. It was one
And
that I
that,
wasn't really into, and then I was like, I need to figure out. I was like losing track of where I was in the comic book universes, and I was like, oh, I need to get into something else. And I found it, and I was like, this is fascinating because it's like a
mhm.
twist on it's the villains, the Thunderbolts. The villains actually are the ones that are technically supposed to be the good people, and so on. So,
And this
Siege.
that is on my notable mentions one,
Is
and I love it. I absolutely love it. He goes after Thor
Yes,
of all people. Why would
Asgard. Asgard is now hovering over United States, and they want to attack. They trick Loki tricks. There's a big Loki's involved in it with some
yeah,
trickster stuff, so it's pretty kind of cool on that aspect. To start war between the United States and Asgard, and it's a really good one to read. That's one that has a 4 part like side issue thing or miniseries.
mm,
But there's 50 comics, and a lot of the good stuff in that series happens in the actual comic books, not in the mini. Like the series, goes along with it is good. But a
yeah.
lot of the stuff happens like Dark Avengers and all that stuff. So that's something one of those ones is it's about 50 comic books that are collected in that whole siege. It's one of the ones I will say that you kind of have to read other books, not just the one that goes along with the name Siege on the top of it.
Yep.
Also written by Brian Michael Bendis. So just want to put that out
Oh, I
there.
love. Yep.
Number 9's The Walking Dead and the Image comic books, Made to Suffer. So that's the one with the governor. No, yeah, the governor.
Okay.
The battle between uh, Rick's group and the governor. I just the storyline behind the whole thing. I don't want to get too far into it again because Walking Dead is one of those ones I feel like you have to know. You have to read the whole thing to get the whole grasp of everything that's going on. But the governor's
Yep.
the villain. Michonne has her own time with him that he kind of treats her horribly.
Yeah, it's
It's when
evil.
they're at the prison, they fight each other, and so on. Great story. It's issues 43 to 48 on The Walking Dead. It's one of those. I love The Walking Dead as a whole, but it's one of those ones that's really good in that section between issues 43 and 48. Again, available in volume. I think it's volume 8 actually. I
Ah,
don't know if you have that or not, but
well, we've got some of the hardcover compendiums. I have
okay.
almost an entire one of those in stock right now.
Number 8, Planet Hulk. So Planet
Mm.
Hulk is also, if you look at a lot of these series, other than this Image one, because Image doesn't have, like Walking Dead doesn't have side comic books to go, it's just one comic
Right.
book.
Right.
But Planet Hulk's one of the few that are on my list that's actually not, doesn't have its own separate series. Planet Hulk is part of the Incredible Hulk. It's issues 92 to 105. It's all in that, except there's also giant size X-Men or giant size Hulk maybe in there too. But what I'm saying is that you
Probably.
have to, it's
That makes
in the
sense.
actual series. It's just like you pick up 91 ended, excuse me, 92 began, and that was Planet Hulk, which is pretty cool.
Yep.
Hulk gets jettisoned off. And so if you actually want to know, it's kind of, they used a lot of that in Thor Ragnarok, the
Yeah.
movie. If you see it, it's a little bit what Marvel's been doing in the movies. They've twisted some of who does what and the characters. They kind of recast them and their roles, kind of. So Hulk's the one that gets landed randomly on Sakaar in Thor Ragnarok. He does as well, but you don't see that. He just ends up there. This is really the storyline of how he got that. Meek's in this one, Korg's in this one.
Yep.
He battles. It's a really good storyline to hear about Hulk, but not on Earth, which is kind of cool. It's Hulk in space in a sense. And so Greg Pak wrote that as well. He's a great Marvel author. Um,
Very good.
so yeah, so great series. Number 8 is Planet Hulk. Number 7 is Maximum Carnage. So we've talked Maximum Carnage before because Carnage is one of my favorite villains.
Very nice.
Maximum Carnage is also pre. It's also one of those storylines that came out. Was it 1993? So
Yep.
it's one of those storylines that don't have the separate comic book to go with it. It was over 5 different amazing Spider-Man comic books, which is kind of funny. When I did the research on that too, and because I've read it and I own it, It's so
Yep.
funny that there was 5 different titles that had the word Spider-Man in it in the 1990s.
Oh yeah,
Still
it's
baffles me.
insane. It was
And
insane.
it fascinates me because speaking of Brian Michael Bendis, he didn't write this, but he's one of my favorite Marvel authors. I
Mm,
guess authors because he also writes for DC. And I was reading how his contract with DC is no longer exclusive, and so now he has the ability to write for whoever he wants. His page rates are down now. There's a bunch of things that are going on, and I want him to come back to Marvel because I love what he did for Marvel and different writings he's done for Marvel. But one of the reasons that he left Marvel in the first place, I guess, was that he wanted the title Spider-Man, just Spider-Man, to be
mm.
Miles Morales, and they weren't letting him do that. And so that to me was like, this reminded me because one of these titles is Spider-Man, but from the 1990s, pre Miles Morales. But
Yeah.
that's a Carnage series. I don't want to get too much into that because I don't want to take up too much time. But Maximum Carnage is it's one of the greatest villain stories in my opinion. He
Very
didn't
nice.
crack the top 10 because I'm also like, I got really into comics in the 2000s. So
Yeah.
like pre 2000 comic books are a little less. I don't know. It's something about the 4-color panels and the older writing.
I have a hard time with some of it.
It's some
Yeah.
of them are a little older. So Maximum Carnage is one of those ones I read once a year maybe, but it's about it, and I can't. It's a 14-part series. It's also again spans across 5 different titles. Number 6 is The Walking Dead again. All Out War. So All Out War is the Negan battle with Rick's people in Alexandria, where they fight the saviors
Yep.
for basically their own freedom, so that Negan doesn't bother them anymore. So that's a really good series, 115 through 126. Again, if you've listened to this podcast before, watched us before, Negan is one of my top 10 favorite villains of all time. So the idea that Negan's storyline of him battling Rick's people, it's got to make my top 10 in that opinion. So Walking Dead, All Out War. Siege, Made to Suffer from The Walking Dead. Planet Hulk, Maximum Carnage, and at number 6 is All Out War from The Walking Dead. That's my 10 through 6.
Nice. Nice.
I'm getting text blown up from my brother, but go ahead.
All right. So I had a hard time organizing mine. There's almost, it was like 1 and 2 was quick and easy, and everything after that I had a hard time with. So I'm almost, I don't know. There's no particular order, I guess, to a degree.
Yes.
You could just say that. So number 10, I have the Spider-Verse series.
Yes.
I absolutely loved it. It introduces Spider-Gwen. I love the idea of these multiple Spider-Men across universes. And if you've ever seen the Into the Spider-Verse movie, it's loosely based, but the general concept of it came from the Edge of the Spider-Verse book series. It's a fantastic read. I highly recommend it. It's an easy go-to Marvel recommendation. If someone says I love Marvel and I love Marvel movies and what would I like to read, I highly recommend this one. It's a 4-part series in trade, and it is I don't know, it's excellent. They're fighting this kind of family of like vampires essentially that are hunting down all of these Spider-Men across the dimensions, and then finally the Spider-Men across dimensions start realizing what's happening and come together to unite, or else they're all going to die. They're being killed by these vampire creatures, and it's it's an awesome read. I highly recommend it. Absolutely love that series. So that's my number 10. Number 9 is DC's Identity Crisis. Something you probably don't know a lot about, Justin. That is a dark storyline. It is not something for children. It's not something for the kind of lighthearted. It surrounds rape. It's very, very deep. But in part of Identity Crisis, one of the superheroes' wife is raped by a supervillain, and the heroes, the Justice League, have to decide what they're going to do about it. And you see, it really starts putting an identity to the darker Justice League members over the lighter Justice League members. And while there's a great scene that I love of Batman talking with kind of the darker members about what they're going to do, and I think it's Green Arrow says, well, Clark's never going to let this happen. And Batman says, Superman hears whatever he wants. He can hear everything, but he still he has to pick what he wants to hear. So basically, their plan is something he's just going to go, it's not, I'm just going to stay out of this. Like, it's, nope. And it is a fantastic, it is dark. It is, it can be a lot on you, but it is a fantastic read for anyone who wants to get into something um, with a deep story. So
And that's Brad Meltzer, who's a he's an author. He's an author as well, not just the guy who wrote Identity Crisis. I thought so.
right.
He's also an author, so that kind of makes sense why it's kind of dark and more gritty than a
Yeah, then your
basic comic book.
standard kind of
Mhm.
basic storyline. So my number 8 was the Secret Wars, which is the Marvel Comics, the Doom series. So it was kind of they had Secret Wars 2 back still in the late 80s, early 90s, somewhere in that
Mhm.
storyline. So this is you'd kind of say Secret Wars 3, but Marvel just titled it Secret Wars.
Yeah.
But basically the idea is the multiverse itself started collapsing, and all the great minds couldn't figure out how sort of to fix it, or what kind of who would take it upon themselves to do so. And Doctor Doom steps up because he's the only one with a big enough ego to
Hmm.
say, I can play God. And at the end of it, makes himself God.
God.
And then you get into what kind of world all of these characters live in, and ultimately who starts to stand up to them. And it's a really fun read. It introduces great characters like Old Man Logan. It's a really fun. It almost feels what if ish. Gives you
Hmm.
that what if feeling. So I absolutely love Secret Wars. Highly recommend that series. Number 7, I go to Guardians of the Galaxy: The Black Vortex. I got into Guardians after the movie came out. We saw the movie. I wasn't really even sure that much about him. I didn't read anything. I ended up loving it. I loved the movie. So I went on to say, all right, I want to read something of this. And I kind of did some research and found Brian Michael Bendis was writing Guardians of the Galaxy. So I started reading, starting right with volume 1 in trade of Brian's work. And that moves on into a story that combines with the X-Men and creates the Black Vortex, which is all about an ancient mirror that you can give yourself to. And if you do, you become a larger kind of cosmic version of yourself. Kind of like almost it can be your best and or worst version. And there's a lot of talk about should these characters even do it? You know, who's sacrificing themselves to it? Who's doing it out of their own egos? And that is it's a great read. I love the Black Vortex, and I love any of Brian Michael Bendis' Guardian work. Is always love it. And number 6 is my certainly my all-time favorite cover artist, Scotty Young's "I Hate Fairyland." That is one of the ones. It's a complete story. Um, there are arcs in it. You can say there are bits of it, but I just kind of went for the entire series of "I Hate Fairyland." I would say if you are an adult now and you miss Calvin and Hobbes, go read "I Hate Fairyland" because it's a twisted adult version of it. Little girl lands in fairyland, and your average little girl or child goes there and comes out in like a day and has a great experience and learns a moral, and it helps set their moral compass. And unfortunately, one girl goes there who has none and is just goes on a tirade and is there for 30 years swinging battle axes and swords and causing terror. And it is one of the most fun reads I think I've ever had in comics. I absolutely love it.
It definitely is. I mean, if anybody knows anything about Paul and I, we're Scotty Young fans, and it's like
Yeah.
we're really fans of Scotty Young's art, but then his art transformed into words as well is absolutely
Mm,
awesome as well. I mean, I Hate Fairyland's great. I mean, I'm reading Strange Academy right now, which is excellent. Middle
yep.
West is excellent. He's just done a
Yep.
great job with some of these books writing as well. And I Hate Fairyland didn't make my list. I will tell you that right now, but
Okay.
I can understand why, because it is. If you're going to stay away from superheroes and you want to read something that's fun and twisted and a little out there,
Yep.
with great artwork again, Scotty Young, and the storyline. Yes, I love that. It's absolutely perfect. What I will say about Secret Wars, it's funny to think about. I read back, I forget when it was, the original Secret Wars. One of the reasons why they did Secret Wars is because they did studies on words, and the word secret and the word war were like the top searched, like it's top words talked about in the world or something along those lines.
Okay.
So that Marvel was just like, we'll make millions, put them together, Secret War, and then
Hot
for them to
topic.
relaunch it in the 2015, late 2015
Mm.
into 2016 with the Secret Wars or Battle World and all that stuff. That's when I had taken a break from comic books for a little bit, I was really into comic books in the, like 04, 05, 06, 07, right around that area. And then I took a break for a couple of years, and what launched me right back into the freaking world was
Mm,
Secret Wars. But for some reason, it didn't make my list. And I think maybe because I felt a money grab after it with all the
yeah,
new number ones, and it's probably, it has nothing to do
yeah.
with the actual story, because the Secret Wars story is amazing, and I love the writing about it. I love the comic book art. I love the storyline behind it. I love the idea about taking all the universes and smashing them together. I love about the reset. I love the idea that let's not confuse the reader in Marvel and just have one universe in a sense, other than
Mm,
Spider-Man. But like the idea that
yeah,
there's one main, there's no ultimate universe and regular universe and da da da. But the idea that basically everything relaunched at number one to try to get people to buy number ones that
you're
were not
right.
worth anything.
The
I mean,
excuse to the number one, but
and it hasn't changed since then. I feel like that was the time from 2015 till now. Marvel has just, and then other companies have followed, DC and all these other companies have followed,
mm,
but they reset a lot, if that makes
yeah,
any sense. Like they just, oh, we got to go back to number one. It's like
almost every year, some of
you
them,
don't
and
see
it's
Spider-Man 556 anymore. You don't see,
yeah,
and that's it basically started right around 2015, 2016 when they put that Secret Wars out. So that's probably why it slipped out of the top 10.
I can see
Unbelievable
that.
storyline, love it. And Spider-Verse again, I'll totally agree on that. I think if you're not into comic books that much, Spider-Man's a really easy character to get around, like to
Very
grasp.
much.
And if you
Yep.
want something twisted and something, Spider-Verse, the movie has like Spider Pig in there, Spider Ham. I mean,
Yep.
you can read Spider-Man Noir, Spider Gwen. So there's all kind of, if you're like into the Spider-Man thing and you want
Mm,
more of it. There's not
yeah.
very many. It's like Captain America. There isn't like Captain America the pig and Captain America
Right.
the 30. It's just Captain America.
Captain America.
Uh,
Like, you can
so it's
follow it, and that's all you got.
so Spider Verse is really cool, and obviously I'm a big Spider Gwen fan, so that makes a
Yep.
little bit of sense there too. So great, love it, love your 10 through 6. We'll go over it again at the end, but we'll go into my top five.
All right. Let's see your number
And
five.
number five. So this is again the putting them in order was a weird thing too, because it's like
Mm,
I love a lot of these five equally. There's reasons at the end, like there's reasons why I would think that some of them are higher than the others because of specific characters that are in them
yep.
or comic
That
books
makes sense.
themselves that are in those series
Yeah.
or writers. But I just put them on the paper and I said, this is the way I want to do it. And I think there's actually one that slipped way up. It probably was my number five. It slipped way up more recently because I've read it a couple of times and I'm pretty excited about it. So number five,
All right.
written by Brian Michael Bendis.
Ooh.
Surprising there. It's a 12 issue series that goes in this series that has 40 something comic books total, but there's 12 issues. It's Avengers versus X-Men.
Okay.
So Avengers
That's funny.
versus X-Men is a great story because it pits two hero teams against each other, which is not
Yeah.
something you
Very,
get normally. You
very
see villain
iconic.
teams against each other because it's like villains want to fight everything. But to
Yeah.
see these two people that are trying to protect this earth, this world, this universe pitted against each other to try to save the universe. And you can see both sides of it. I mean, not to get too much into it because I don't want to spoil it for everybody, but like the basic beginning premise is that there's Hope, the mutant Hope. The Phoenix Force is coming back. If anybody has read, previous comic books, the Dark Phoenix saga and so on,
You've
the
seen the
Phoenix Force.
fantastic X-Men movies by Sony.
God, the Phoenix Force is coming, and it's the theory is that it's going after Hope, and so the X-Men led by Cyclops, Scott Summers thinks that it's the saviors to the mutant race, is this Phoenix Force that will come and take over Hope and do so on and so forth. And then the Avengers on the other side of it are like, no, 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 it's going to destroy the Earth. It's going to destroy the world. It's going to destroy the universe,
Right. Remember what
based on what
happened in
we've
the
known
past.
from before, which is crazy
Yeah.
because if you also think about it, Scott Summers knows firsthand why this is a bad thing. So
Yeah.
it's an
I mean, he
interesting,
saw his wife get
yes.
possessed by this thing.
And so it's the idea between rebirth of our species and the mutants give shit to the Avengers saying you don't care about us. We've been cast aside and ostracized and all da. And so it's really good, and it expels the Phoenix Five out of it. Again, I don't want to tell everybody so much about it, but like the Phoenix Five is an interesting thing
I
that
like
comes
the
out of
idea of
it.
that. Yeah.
The Utopia, the Floating Fortress. So it's a bunch that go into it, but it's a very good series. Brian Michael Bendis is one of the greatest Marvel writers, actually one of the greatest writers, because haven't read any of his work from DC, but I know he's one of the greatest comic book writers out there. And the series, again, if you want to get into a series, it's like basically good people fighting against good people for what they believe in and what they think is right to save the earth. They're still thinking, they're not against the other group because they hate the other group. They're fighting the other group because they think it's best for what's going on in this universe. And
All
that's
about
kind of
their
cool.
ideals.
And it's a long series. I mean, if you think about it, for those ones, I mean, most of them, Secret Wars, you mentioned 8 issues. You know, a lot of the other series are 6, 8, 4, 10 issues. This is a 12-issue series. There's a lot to unpack in it. And so it's definitely worth it. Avengers versus X-Men. There's also a side series that came out around 2015, 2016. The Avengers versus giant size, was it giant size little Marvel X-Men versus?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I haven't
Scotty
read
Young
that
did
yet.
the cover. Yeah. So, so number 5, X-Men versus Avengers versus X-Men, or AVX, by Michael Bendis, Marvel.
So if I could, the only thing I didn't like about I'm not going to spoil it, but there is a very epic thing that happens in that book, and I had to go back and reread the page a couple times. I was like, was that it? I knew it was happening. I knew it was going to come, and it happened, and I kept going, and I'm like, wait, and I backed up. I'm like, was that it? It didn't seem like what occurred was made a very large deal in that book.
I will say, to give a little thing, is the critics gave it kind of, when the comic book critics looked at it and read it, they were like, eh. And it was, I mean, it's towards the end of Brian Michael Bendis's run at Marvel. Like, he was on the way out of Marvel at the time. But again, the whole aspect about it, I think, is just a fun series, and that's how it slipped into my number 5. I just reread it a couple nights ago, and it's just it's just fun. Again, it's different. If you're big Avengers fans and X-Men fans, it's all in the same comic.
You're getting everything you want right there.
And so But yeah, that makes sense. Man. I know you're talking about, and it does make sense. But.
Yeah, I want to reread it again at some point. I read that I don't know, a couple years ago probably. And it's one of the books I will definitely consider rereading. Mm-hmm. But that one, I don't know, that one bugged me. I was so excited to read that, and it bugged me. So all right, so my number 5. So I brought along a copy. Is Spider-Man Blue by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale. I love Tim Sale's artwork. I know some people complain it becomes very, very similar, and some people complain of Jeff's writing becoming sort of copying over and over. But some of it's a theme. But Spider-Man Blue is in my top 5. So this goes into a lot about the loss of Gwen Stacy. And I think an amazing part of this is, and I need to refresh, was Steve Ditko, I believe, that wrote the kind of idea of killing Gwen Stacy.
Yes. Was it? Yeah.
If I remember correctly. And I could be wrong.
Keep going. I'm looking it up.
Okay. So he actually came back and said that he was impressed with what Jeff Loeb took from something he made and gave it depth and feeling. Mm-hmm. Because at the time, and of course this was the 60s, they killed Gwen off. Comics were kind of one-shots. They weren't super deep and in depth, and they dealt with people's problems, but they kind of killed Gwen as we need to kill a character. Let's do something shocking and kill someone and really kill them, because issue after issue, nothing really occurred. The bad guys never died, everything. So they killed Gwen. And Jeff went back with this and really created a feeling to this and how it affected Peter and how it still to this day affects Peter. Mm-hmm. And I love Tim's artwork in it. It has a great feel, great colors to kind of have this feeling of sadness that attaches to Gwen's death that when it was originally written wasn't really there. It was Gwen died. Okay, shocking, move on. And they bring back how long this has affected Peter's life and how at the end of it all, if that hadn't happened, Peter would have been with Gwen, not with Mary Jane. Mm-hmm. That was his love, his true love was Gwen Stacy. And it's a moving book, and I highly recommend that to any reader. That's a good one for someone who wants to get into something that might be new to comics and kind of feels that comics are a one-shot not deep story. Well, read this and you'll have some feeling. So
And
that's
so
my
just to
Spider-Man
touch
bully
on
take.
that, it's Gary Conway was the author of The Death of Gwen Stacy. With
Okay.
the art was done. The inker was done by John Romita Sr. And it was John Romita Sr.'s idea as the artist to kill off Gwen Stacy. And then the two of them, obviously, Roy Thomas, I believe, also was involved in that too. But
Thank
yeah,
you
it
for
was
the
John Romita
research, because
Sr. Well, John, I think I remember seeing this too. I forget what it was. I think I was reading it was probably there's like multiple Marvel like books about the history of Marvel,
yep.
and I think one of them mentioned the idea because it was such an obscure idea.
Mm,
First of all, she's not a supervillain or she's not a superhero. She's a
right.
character. She's a, if you think about it, she's not, but she's a B character in the series
Yeah,
to
she's a
kill off
side
someone.
story.
But it's so bad to kill off something that's not in the battle. So if that makes any sense, like you think about Spider-Man dying, he dies in the battle. Whereas Gwen
Right.
Stacy is a side character that once the battle starts, she's no longer in the picture anymore. Especially in the age of comic books where they were like they not to be mean, but they were like, oh, the men are the comic book characters, the females are just the
Yeah,
side characters that
they're
they're
just
at
there
home,
for
they're at home making the bed for when the Spider-Man gets home, kind of thing. and and so it was a crazy thing for them to do. Um, and then I like how they reinvented her future with Spider-Verse and things like that, with the idea that Gwen
yeah.
Stacy is now part of the superhero. It's like we killed her off a long time ago, but now she's back in a different universe as a superhero, which is pretty cool too. So like that aspect of it, and I love how the idea that Gwen Stacy being dead and her becoming a superhero are both in your top 10 list in a sense. Not
Right. Yeah, I
yeah,
got
but
both parts of it in there. Yep. So that is I don't
I
know.
like
I
it because
love
I don't.
Spider-Man.
Yeah, I like it because I don't. I wouldn't have pictured that on the list, but it's a great pick, and so I wrote it down too because one of the great things I'm loving about this is that I'm gonna now go back and probably read a lot of these series over again. And the same thing way I like doing it with Josh Moulton from Queen City Cinema Club with his top 10 movies is the idea that I can go watch some movies that he's like, hey, you should really see this movie. I'm like, oh, I haven't seen that movie, and I go watch it, so it's pretty cool.
Right, go check it out.
Selfishly, I love that. So number 4 for me is not a surprise that it's in my top 10 for you probably, but it's the Infinity Gauntlet series. George Perez as most of the artists on that, written by Jim Starlin back in the 90s, 1991 to be exact. 6-issue series. That was one that was basically the series. It wasn't the mixture of a bunch of different books. There were some books that had some tie-in characters, but it basically was the Infinity Gauntlet series that was people looked at. Do you happen to have those? You have those right there?
Yeah, I
Books
believe we
for
do have
sale?
those in stock still. Yep.
Yeah. So, but I have them as well. My wife got them me for my birthday or Christmas one year, my birthday a
Nice.
couple years ago. I love it. So obviously, if anybody knows MCU, Marvel Cinematic Universe, a lot of it's loosely based off of what goes on in Infinity Gauntlet. I will
Yeah.
also tie in there that I didn't put it in this, but the Infinity 2013 series is they're not the same, but the idea that the Hickman 2013 series is also really good, but I have to go back to the OG Infinity Gauntlet.
Understandable.
So it's some cool things in there. Again, we've talked about it on previous episodes about how infatuated Thanos is with death, the character Death, and that he'll do anything for Death, and the idea that there's parts in there where he doesn't use his full capability of powers to show her that he can, do anything for her.
Be the man for her.
It doesn't, it baffles me. So it's a great series. I honestly, George Perez is one of my favorite artists of all time. I've met him. He's drawn something for me. We've talked about that before. So that series has a tight spot in my mind for that series. However, it wasn't enough to bring it up to the top 3. There's some things in there again, the 1990s comic books over the 2000s and newer, that has something to do with it.
The writing, it just doesn't.
And it's the thing is
well.
because back in the 1990s and prior, the authors weren't staggeringly good authors because it wasn't something that paid and it wasn't something that could make you money. And so nowadays there's artists that are making buku bucks writing comic books. So it's like
these books weren't on the New York Times bestsellers list at that time.
No, so
they weren't looked at. They weren't read by a huge wealth of people.
And what's actually kind of funny about it too is I remember reading it recently again is the idea that it's kind of funny that that Silver Surfer's the one that slams into or falls out of space and slams into the United States or into the into the Earth to
Mhm.
warn that Thanos is coming, that Thanos is
Yeah.
where it is, which is kind of funny. What do you think they would have used Silver Surfer if the rights were at Marvel instead of Hulk? Because Bruce Banner slams
Right.
to Doctor Strange and tells him that Thanos is
Yeah.
coming.
Thanos is
That
coming.
it's Silver Surfer who does it in the comic book. That maybe if the rights were at Marvel, maybe Silver Surfer would have done that, or the storyline just happened to be well with the Hulk on the ship in the
That's
out.
interesting. I hadn't thought of that really. Yeah, that's interesting to bring up. I'm still waiting for Silver Surfer to come to the MCU because
Yes.
it's funny. I don't know why I have this love of Surfer, even though I don't. Besides Silver Surfer Black, that I absolutely love that book.
I was just
I
gonna
don't.
say if I want him to come to the Marvel universe, I want Silver Surfer Black to come.
Yeah, I don't. I don't have a lot of Silver Surfer stuff in my collection. I don't read tons of his stuff, but for whatever reason, and I don't know. I had read this. It is Stan Lee's personal favorite character that he ever created was Silver Surfer, and I don't know if that gives me some sort of love for him. I love the image of him. This mirror person on a surfboard flying through space with all this cosmic power. I don't know. I love the Surfer.
And,
Um,
he's a good person, but also a bad person in a sense. Like there's that aspect with his connection with
yeah,
Galactus, and so
yeah.
it's like you wanna cheer for him, and you think he's a good person, but he's also
He has
connected
this.
in a way to this horrible person or horrible
He has this
thing.
guilt that's connected to him forever. But he did what he ultimately thought was right to save his home and his
Yeah.
people, and it's he's a fascinating character with a lot of depth. He's I don't know.
But
I
yeah,
love the Surfer.
so Infinity
All right.
Gauntlet. Again, if I had gun to my head, tell me to choose which series to read as an adult again, I'd
Mm,
probably pick the 2013 Hickman Infinity series. Really badass artwork on those. It's like the
the
symbol, like
art's
the freaking
art's
awesome.
amazing.
But the OG Infinity Gauntlet is probably where.
It's where it's at. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can agree with that. So I read Infinity 3 times so far. The 2013.
Yeah.
The first time I saved up some money. It's a big trade,
Mm-hmm.
and I saved up. It was like I think at the time it was like an $80-$90 trade.
Yeah.
And I got it for my birthday, and I sat there for the summer, and I started reading it. And I remember specifically we were at the beach. My wife says, "How's it going?" I said, "I don't know what the hell's going on. I'm lost." But I also
But that's Hickman
there's
for you, though.
pre
That's
stuff
so
to it.
Hickman.
There's pre stuff I hadn't read, and it is Hickman's writing. I'm like, I don't know what the hell's going on. And when I got done with it, she goes, "What do you think?" I said, "I don't know what the hell's going on." And I've gone back through and reread so much stuff pre this and build up, very subtle build up to it, that it fills in a lot of the key blank elements but at the same time, I've read it 3 times and I still find new stuff in it. So the 2013, it's not in my list, but that's a fun read, and the artwork is amazing. The artwork is beautiful. So
I love how you mentioned you were lost because the Jonathan Hickman is one of the greatest Marvel writers I think in history. However, it is to a point where there's times where you're just like, where the hell is he going with this, or what the hell just happened? Because it's just he's so deep and so there's so
yeah,
much going on. He has so much thought process behind a lot
he's
of these
dropping in
things.
characters like universes away,
I
and I'm
mean,
like, who the hell is this, and what are they doing?
I think
We won't
Powers
get them
of X
back
and
for
House of X were all like that too recently. Like
yeah,
those are ones that too I read 3 or 4 times. I'm like, what the frick is going on? I have no idea what's
yeah.
going on.
I'm so
And it,
lost what the hell's happening.
but
It
he's
comes
so
together.
I'd love to see him do a movie. Jonathan Hickman as a director for a Marvel
Oh,
movie would be freaking awesome. A writer,
absolutely.
screenplay writer. But
Yep.
yes, I'm glad you said that about the Infinity series in 2013 because it is to me that way too. It's a great series, and again, didn't make my list at all. Like you didn't make yours,
Didn't
but
make
part of it
mine,
may be
but
that because you have to read it 4 or 5 times to actually get the
yeah,
hell's going
to
on.
actually get it all, and some of the prelude stuff, and it's a lot. But that's a good nod. So anyway, so I am going. My number 4
4.
goes to the Nailbiter
Yep.
series. So this is a full series. There's arcs. It recently, I can't say recently, a few years ago it ended and then it's restarted recently. So you could say that Nailbiter, the original story arc, but it realistically connects and goes on. So it's a full series. It's a horror book. I never was big on horror before. I didn't read a lot of it, and it was around the time that I opened the store. Realistically, maybe a little before that I started reading some horror. I needed something fresh. I needed something different. And then since opening the store, I read horror. I don't want to say exclusively, but I read a lot of it. I bet 80% of what I read is horror, and it's a murder mystery. There is a ton going on, and for as far as a book goes, it is the number one series I've ever read that makes me want to turn the page to the next one. I'm always excited. What the hell is going to happen next? And you turn the page, and then you're sucked in. You go to that next page. What? Oh my god! And you flip it again. I can't recommend Nailbiter enough. It is a great series. It is all surrounding the idea that this little town in Washington State has created more prolific serial killers than anywhere else in the world. Why? Why does one little town create all of these killers? And they all have like gimmicks to them. And this one FBI agent goes to try to figure out what's going on there and try to get down to the root of it. And he calls his friend, who is like a CIA interrogator, and says, "You need to get out here." And by the time that the guy gets on a plane and gets there, his friend's gone missing. Well, the hunt starts. What has happened to him? And the nail biter is one of the killers, and he was acquitted on all charges. They couldn't stick him, and he's back living in his hometown here. So it follows him, the serial killer, and then it follows the agent looking for his friend. And the agent's got some pretty deep stuff that's happened in his background. He's pretty questionable, and he's certainly not afraid to go beyond the legal means of finding information. And it's a great series, and you never know what the hell's gonna happen on the next page. So Nailbiter goes to my number 4.
Just listening to you talk about that, I was like, why hasn't that? Sounds like it would be a great TV show.
I'm amazed it hasn't come out yet.
And I was just Googled the TV show thing, and people talked about it this year about how it should be the next greatest thing. And
yeah,
and
any day now, any day that is going to appear on Netflix or Hulu or Prime or HBO Max, something is going to pick it up. And I don't know how it's made it this long without getting picked up.
It seems like it'd be like a cool series like that.
Yeah, it would be terrific because it's great for that cliffhanger end of the issue. So every episode you can kind of get that, holy crap, you got to wait until the next one to get on. And it'd be an excellent TV show. And I mean, realistically, it's a bunch of serial killers. So, certainly not hard to film some horror stuff.
And as you obviously saw, the two of my bottom 5, if I would say, my 10 through 6 are Walking Dead. Walking Dead was that for me, for the idea that I was like, what the heck's going on? That's a comic book. Walking Dead is one of those comic books I kind of like, do I read it before I go to bed or not? Because if I read it before I go to bed, I'm going to stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning, just continuously reading it.
I did that with Walking Dead.
And that's the idea, because it was something about the next thing. And so if I feel like if I Nailbiter is one of those ones, I'm going to want to sit on the couch and read in the middle of the day so I can just bust through the whole thing if I want to. Because if I read it at night, I'm not gonna be able to sleep, because I'm just gonna be like, okay, what's next? And there's certain things that I just can't do that, and that's one of them. It's like a comic book that's okay, it's worth reading. Okay, I can stop in the middle of a book. Doesn't sound like Nailbiter is one of those ones I'll be able to stop in the middle of a book.
When I started Nailbiter, so I got volume 1 to try it, and I don't think I was halfway through it before I got on and ordered the entire rest of the series myself. And I almost always have a full run in the store, because it's one of the first series I recommend to somebody if they're into horror, if they're not superheroes. Hey, I love stuff, but I don't really do superheroes. I said, well, what do you feel about this? It's a horror. It's bloody, it's gory, but it is a fantastic read in so much, what is going to happen next in it. So it is absolutely. I flew through that series. I couldn't put it down. I read it every chance I got. And now I'm sitting here waiting, because Nobody Returns started, and I got in the first issue, and I immediately got a copy for myself. And I went home and read it. I'm like, oh man! And I'm like, I gotta wait a month. And then I'm like, I can't do that. All the rest of them I have in trade. Like, I'm gonna have to wait for the trade. And I waited, and I got the trade. My wife got it for me for Christmas. That was the first book I read. I got a stack of trades for Christmas. That was the first one I read. I went right through it in no time, and I was like, damn it. And my newest order I just did, I saw the next volume in trades coming out, and I'm already like, I can't wait for it to show up. I got 2 more months, and I can't wait.
And that's what I think that's all about. That's what makes a good storyline is that aspect of
Oh,
it, and the idea that
absolutely.
there. I mean, as we get to the top three for me too, there hasn't been something. I mean, if you look at my list, none of these have come out in the past 10 years.
Yeah,
Like none of my like literally,
I
they're all
I'm
early
impressed
two
with your list
thousands.
for the spread of era in that in
Mm-hmm.
time, because you've got Maximum Carnage and you've got Infinity Gauntlet
But
and
there is, as we
yeah,
get closer to here, there is this aspect that there's ones that go back to back to back or whatever. But like the
yeah,
idea that one of the things I'm sad about, it makes me sad about as a Marvel fan, is the fact that nothing has grabbed me. And King in Black is probably the best that's come out in a long time. But if you look back, I mean, Empire was and then before that,
yeah.
War of the Realms is I mean, the last good, really good story arc, like big thing was probably Secret Wars. You mentioned in 2015,
Yeah,
2016. That's 5 or 6 years ago. So that's
yeah,
part of why I think Brian Michael Bendis coming back and doing them hiring him to do one more series might be a
would be something.
cool thing for me. But so
Yeah.
speaking of Brian Michael Bendis,
Oh, here we go.
writer of Secret Invasion at number 3 for me.
Oh,
Oh,
very nice.
so
Yep.
Secret Invasion was one of those ones that really got me into the idea. Like that Secret Invasion was probably the first one that got me as a series that got me go. Marvel has this genius idea of me reading New Avengers and Mighty Avengers and Wolverine and all these different comic books, and they all
Everything.
like I'm seeing a battle from this side, and on this other comic book I'm seeing it from the other side, and on the other
Yeah.
comic book I'm seeing it from over there, and it's like it's the movie Vantage Point. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Vantage Point, but it's
No.
that idea that's like Vantage Point is like a 12-minute movie, but it's from all the different vantage points. It's cool, but it also is infuriating because you watch the same thing happen over and over again.
Over and over and over
But the
again.
idea that like I'm reading New Avengers and New Avengers are battling the Mighty Avengers, and on the other side of it, you read Mighty Avengers and they're battling the New Avengers, and it's like this
Mhm.
idea behind. So beyond the actual story of what Secret Invasion is that I feel like what Marvel did during the entire series and making it cohesive um, was the best that was in any of them. A lot of the comic books at the time, and even with the newer ones, the other ones that I mentioned, Avengers or X-Men and all this stuff, they didn't do as good of a job, I don't think, as Secret Invasion did with making it feel like the MCU. An example, obviously, we didn't know the MCU was coming at that
Right. It was
point, but
coming
like,
at the time.
but the idea that when you watch Thor and they mention Doctor Strange, and when you watch Captain America and they mention Iron Man, and it's like that was what they did in comic books, which was like obviously what they wanted to do years ago
Right.
and what Stan Lee had, but this was like they did it amazingly. And Brian Michael Bendis' series, I think, look at that. It was an 8-issue series, The Secret Invasion. And again, I think that's another one like Siege, where it was like a lot of the storylines happened in the other comic book, the normal comic books, not
Mm.
just the comic book that came out for the series. There's 110 plus issues
Oh,
that
I
have
know. I've been trying to complete
tie-ins to Secret
that.
Invasion. And so but Secret Invasion, just to give people a little bit of an idea, it is the Skrulls destruction of their home planet or home world, I should say. And so the leadership, they basically they're shapeshifters, if anybody doesn't know what Skrull does. And the idea is they come to the world and the Earth, and they switch places with some of the superheroes, and you don't know who's a
Who to
Skrull and
trust?
who's not.
Yeah.
Was it?
You don't know who to trust. You don't know
Yes. Yeah, and that was their
any
whole
minute
like
one of them can
tagline
be
was who to
turned on
trust.
you. Yeah.
And the idea behind that you don't know, like you wouldn't know basically until you kill them.
Yeah.
That they're a scroll because they'll shape shift back, which I don't know how that works. If
They
how
must
do
not
you
be able to hold the
correct, but how do you yeah, okay.
yeah.
It's comic
Don't
books,
question
but
it. Don't question it.
in that and it kind of makes me, with my love for Secret Invasion, top 3 comic book story arc of all time in my opinion, makes me kind of sad about the MCU and the idea that Skrulls were introduced to Captain Marvel and they were more good than bad.
Agreed. Yeah,
It
that's
made me go,
disappointed me in
one
that
of my
movie.
favorite storylines in comic books is Secret Invasion, and they were the evil people. So it's like,
Yeah.
so, and then they're gonna do the Secret Invasion TV show, which also kind of makes me sad because I was really hoping that was
Next movie, next
the
arc.
next Infinity saga
Yeah.
was gonna be Secret Invasion.
That's where I
But
thought they were going.
But I do understand because there's ways to do things and so on. So a number of years from now, we will get the Secret Invasion TV show, and we'll see how that goes and see how it goes with that aspect of it. But another home run for me for Brian Michael Bendis and his ability to incorporate the whole thing. And again, it really got me into the idea that you can read multiple titles and they intertwine. It's not me reading The Walking Dead and me reading Nailbiter and me reading Teenage Ninja Turtles that have no connection to each other.
Right.
I could read the Mighty Avengers. Oh, what's the new Avengers? Oh, I could read the Secret Invasion thing, and they all like it was expansion of the same storyline, which was fascinating to me. And that was again mid 2000s that came out, and that was just it. It's so good, but it must mean that 2 and 1 are even better because it's number 3.
You're
So
right.
I will say, in the past, when I've made my own storyline lists in my head, it was number 1. So it has been surpassed by other
That's come
ones
down.
in more recently.
Nice.
So Secret Invasion.
I am actually working on completing the entire trade set of that, which is still an obscene amount of trades.
Oh, it's
Um,
100 plus issues, 110 plus issues is insane.
I think it's 40 trades or
Yeah,
something.
probably.
It's insane. Yeah. The Deadpool one is great. That's a riot in that series. There is a great one called I think it's Frontline.
Yep.
Where it has regular everyday people and their siblings and spouses and things have been replaced by Skrulls, and it gives you the idea because in an average Skrull versus a superhero, they can't really do
Yeah.
a whole hell of a lot. Like the superheroes just slaughter them, but an average human against this Skrull is terrifying. And that was an awesome look at that storyline of what it was like for the average person living in a major city that is being taken over by these aliens. So yeah, I agree with all that. It didn't make my list, and I thought about it. It might have been on my notable mentions, but it's yeah, Secret Invasion is fantastic. Very good
I
pick.
have 3. I had 3 on my honorable mentions to talk about afterwards, but I thought I'd talk about them at the end, or if you brought
Yep.
them up in yours, so just to let you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
We'll
Secret
go.
Invasion. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll go into those. All right. So my number 3 was something you mentioned earlier, and I have got Planet Hulk. Planet Hulk. I can't say enough how much Ragnarok was ruined for me by Planet Hulk because I love this book
Yes.
so much, and so much of Ragnarok just was not done right to do that. And I wish that Planet Hulk was given its own MCU movie. If you were gonna do a Hulk movie, I want to see it be that. Hulk is shot off into space. He comes on a planet, and he sort of evolves the longer he's there. And he is this ultimate hero. If you are a fan of Game of Thrones, I feel like it's very Game of Thrones like. It was a book I got this for Christmas from my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, and once I started it, I could not put this book down. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I couldn't wait to read it again. If I ran out of time, if something happened, I had to go, whatever. It has some great background characters, and it's all about his rise to the top and then his eventual fall from betrayal and how he actually could have been happy. He finally could have really settled and been happy. And it leads on to a sequel, which I was not as big a fan of, but I mean, he comes back to Earth pissed. He is just ready to kill him. And there's my favorite quote from the sequel is he grabs Black Bolt, who can crush mountains with his voice. And Black Bolt whispers at him there to try to stop him. And he grabs him and says, "I didn't come here to hear you whisper. I came here to hear you scream." And it is Hulk. It is like the epitome of what Hulk is. There's a terrific scene where some of the small aliens are put into this galactic style fight with this huge alien, and they're all panicking. They're like, "What do we do? We run, we hide." And Hulk jumps in, "We smash," and he goes over them. And it's like, that's Hulk, right? That's the Hulk moment you're waiting for. It's one of the things I hate about Ragnarok. You want to see Hulk smash. You want to see him be angry. And when Bruce Banner jumps off of the spaceship and he comes down, he splats. I hate that scene. I'm like, you want Hulk? That's what he is. Stop getting this stupid comedic. Let's get a little laugh at him splatting. No, give me Hulk. That's what I want to see. And Planet Hulk for me was everything I want to see in the Hulk himself. I absolutely loved it. So That's my number 3 pick, and I can't say enough good about it. Greg Pak is phenomenal.
He tell you what's funny kind of thing is my favorite series that came out more recently that Greg Pak wrote was Hulkverines, and that was a small little series that came out. It was really fun, but
That's a
like
short one.
it was, but it was fun, and he did it, and I forgot he had done that when I was looking up a little bit about Greg Pak. But what I will say about the movie aspect of it is I feel like there's that's one of the only characters that's still got a twisted freaking background remaining from Marvel, because Universal Studios still owns a crap ton of connected rights of way that Hulk is allowed to be in movies, and why it's surprising that that Hulk is going to be in She-Hulk, the TV show on Disney Plus, because there's still this weird connection between Universal and so they couldn't have done, I don't think, a Planet Hulk movie. So they tried to do a Planet Hulk movie in a Thor movie, which is probably why they did the way they did it. But I understand where you're coming from as a Planet Hulk fan. There's also a good animated film, Planet Hulk 2, if anybody wants to visit it. It's a great animated film.
I highly recommend the animated film if you want to watch
the idea behind they did, I liked how they pulled some elements in it, because I do think that Taika Waititi did a good job with what he was given for Ragnarok. But I think if you compare it to Planet Hulk and the series that we're talking about for both of us, there is some lackingness to it. There is the idea that Meek is a warrior in a sense in the Planet Hulk, and he's this like slug thing in the movie, which he does kick ass. He does kick ass in Endgame. He has a suit like he does. He looks more like what he would look like in Planet Hulk in Endgame that he does in Thor Ragnarok. But yes, the idea behind
and Korg was all comedic. His only purpose in the movies was a comedic sense. It felt like in the books he's much more intense. He's much more.
And it's funny about it is actually Korg has been technically a Korg race. The race of his species has actually been in 2 Marvel movies. He was actually in was it Dark World? He fights the big rock monster. That was the first introduction of
him.
Correct. And that was gonna be Korg. Basically, people told me that was Korg until Thor Ragnarok came out, and they wanted to use him as a different
one of his species. Korg
and Meek from Thor Ragnarok, but so
and that was what Journey into Mystery. Korg first appeared in. His people came in, and that was a very, very early Marvel book.
As you can see, he's blue. He was blue. He was actually gold, like the yellowish color. No, but
more
Planet
thing
Hulk,
looking.
Again, like you mentioned, what I do like about Planet Hulk, and it was on my list, and I'm glad we were able to talk about this, is the idea that it was off-world. It was off Earth. Like there's too much when you look at comic books. One of the things a friend of ours of the web podcast, Friends from Work, does a podcast about the MCU, and they mention that they don't want characters to come back. Like this whole WandaVision thing. It's like, is Vision actually alive, or is this whole like, is it just they don't want the Loki show? Is he actually alive again, or is this prior? Something about about comic books is that we've always no one ever dies. Like it's always some sort of reboot or something. So
sometimes it's too much. It's like, oh, who cares?
And so the same thing goes with how many times can you destroy a massive city on the Earth before like can we just do it over and over and over again? And so the idea that I like about them sending Hulk, I mean Hulk is a good person, but also a person who can't control himself. And so
he's a monster.
The Illuminati had a good intentions to send him into outer space, to have him
be happy.
They basically sent him out to go to an uninhabited planet, but that he could live on and do what he wanted to and not hurt anybody and survive. And he got sucked into a wormhole and ended up on Sakaar. I tell you, the Sakaar planet was well done in Ragnarok in a sense. Like I feel like that was one of the things that if you take the planet Earth or Planet Hulk versus Ragnarok idea, that a Grand Master being there instead of the leader of the Sakaar,
the king of the
there's a little bit there, but yes.
I thought the king in Planet Hulk was well built up though to be just despisable. Like he's just, you want to see him get it. He's a horrible, evil dictator that is all about himself and his own motives, and basically his own pleasures. Whatever he wants is he's gonna get, and nobody can really stop him until Hulk comes.
And so I do understand you're saying if you take Planet Hulk as a storyline and take Ragnarok as a storyline and put them together, they don't compare because
No, yeah.
but if you take it as this is how we're going to get Planet Hulk into the MCU.
The best we can do to kind of
it is what it is at that point. But yes, watch the animated film. It's definitely worth watching. I think that's one thing that Marvel's always lacked on is the animated side. DC's
animated are very good.
Is unbelievable. But there's that is one of the really good ones. Is the Planet Hulk Blu-ray? This Blu-ray they have it on Blu-ray now too. So
where the average DC movie is just awful.
Yes, exactly. And actually, TV shows are not that great either. But
not really.
So
in our humble opinions.
So I had Planet Hulk at number 8, number 3 for you. That's excellent. I think that's a great, and I love your take on it as well. So number 2 has a connection to current times. Can you guess what number 2 is for me?
I have an idea.
House of M. So Brian Michael Bendis comes back on my onto my list. So House of M, I think. I
want to see how many repeating writers I have versus your Brian Michael Bendis.
Brian Michael Bendis, he's my last. I will say this is my last Brian Michael Bendis comic book story arc on my list, but he's on 1, 2, 3. I guess he's only on 3. No,
really?
4.
Okay,
4 out of 10.
It seemed like more than that, but I love Brian Michael Bendis. I have no complaints.
And here's the deal. House of M, Secret Invasion, Avengers versus X-Men, and Siege. They're all like close together. Like there's one in between there. That are all like right around the same time. So it was basically building on each other. So if you take it, they encapsulating all of it. It's the continuation. It's of the same
one
storyline.
Story. Flow. Yeah.
But House of M, if anybody doesn't know, is Scarlet Witch. Again, if you're watching WandaVision, has some. They're pulling obviously from that series in a sense. Yeah. She creates or there's a created alternate reality that she creates that basically has the mutants as the superior people, like that are treated correctly, and the Homo sapiens like us are treated horribly or sapes. But yet, I just read it too. Wolverine, I believe, is the only one that knows, which is kind of funny too, because it reminds me of or mostly the only one that knows that this is not real. Like this is not like what the fuck is going on right now. And that is how they try to they break people's minds. Like this is not we're not in the reality right now. This is not our own reality.
Well, I like how it's Xavier who keeps coming back to her until she just creates a world where he doesn't exist. Xavier's dead. Problem solved. I can do what I want now.
And the idea that also it's really so backing up a little bit just to give a little bit of the beginning part of it. Again, I definitely recommend reading House of M, especially if you're watching WandaVision right now. Definitely on your reading list.
Very good.
But the idea that they Avengers and the X-Men and the heroes of Earth are trying to figure out whether or not they should kill Scarlet Witch or not, because she's causing too many problems, and it's one of those things that's we cannot have her around anymore. Wanda's brother, Pietro, finds out about this story. She tells him, hey, they're going to try to kill you, or Magneto, they're going to try to kill her. And so it flips the whole world upside down. She creates her own alternate reality that is where everything is great and grand and whatever. And so it's a cool thing because it becomes like an alternate universe in a sense, but not really. You see characters that are like what they would envision as what their happiest moments would be. Even though, Peter Parker is happy, he's married, he's got kids, he's like his life is perfect, and he has to make the decision, kind of like Tony Stark did in Endgame, where it's like he has to make the decision. My life is perfect right now, but this is not how it should be, and this is not real. And so they have to fight it off of that. So if you're gonna read, this is not my number 1, so I don't want to give it away. But if you're gonna read House of M, read Avengers Disassembled first. In my opinion, it's a couple issues series that comes out right before that's available in trade, and then read House of M. But House of M to me is a cool show of the powers that Wanda Maximoff or Scarlet Witch has. Again, a great series to read right now if you're watching WandaVision because there's
Yeah.
connections. You can tell what Marvel's done for the movies. They're pulling from multiple different avenues from the comic books, but there is a big thing with her creating her own alternate reality that's probably going to come out to be in part of this show on Disney Plus.
Awesome pick,
80
man.
issues in the whole series, but there's 8
It's
issues in the actual one.
It's a very large series.
But I showed you this the other day. I just got this, which is my House of N #1, signed by Brian Michael Bendis there. And it's the, what is it, 361 out of 499. So that's pretty cool. I already have the whole
Beautiful.
series as well, but I was excited this one came in the other day that I was really excited
That's
to
beautiful.
have because, and the artwork's really good on it too. If anybody, it's like it's more of that. It's more of the Alex Ross style.
Yep.
I forget who the artist is. It's Quaple. I don't know. I forget who it is, but it's like the painting style covers, which are really cool. Which Alex Ross is freaking phenomenal at. But
incredible, absolutely incredible.
Definitely worth it. Twisted. It's if you're watching WandaVision right now, pick up the trade of House of M.
Which, by the way, drives me nuts. I can't help it anymore. I keep having all of these people that I'm like, friends of social media friends or people I went to school with and stuff that I see, and they're like, I started watching WandaVision. It's just stupid. I don't get it. There's no point. And I'm like, read a freaking comic. Like,
but have patience. Yeah. This is a 9-part movie that we're 33% through.
It's a slow burn. It's the way the books are. And if you read, you'd understand. Like, but they obviously are just MCU people. And realistically, in the MCU, Scarlet Witch doesn't do a hell of a lot.
No.
She wiggles her fingers. She shoots some, power, and that's kind of all she does. So I can understand. They're confused. They don't understand her. Overall, this book shows how truly powerful she is. And it also goes into a lot of what it would be like to have someone with mental health problems having powers of cosmic ability, because she's depressed. She doesn't know what to do. She's lost her husband, and how terrifying it is that she can manipulate all of reality, and even do it without necessarily meaning to.
And she manipulated prior to this too, because she manipulated and had her own kids, which is basically in the understanding of what the TV show is. She just had. I mean, I don't want to give it away to anybody, but she's having this crisis, and that none of it's real. But the cool thing about the TV show is we don't know why none of it's real. Is it based on House of M, where she's like creating a separate reality? Is it a reality created for her to keep her contained? Are these people real? Are these people this? The Friends from Work guys had an idea that it's Avengers Standoff. I don't know if you've read that series. There's a connection to that, and that Eric Selvig is they created this fake this prison that people don't know they're villains, but they put them in this world that they're normal people, and they basically brainwashed them into normal people so that you
occupy them.
But is it correct to do that? Is that manipulating someone's mind? So, but it has Wanda Maximoff has the ability to have an alternate reality. And so with House of M, it's just it's a fascinating story. I
love it. Good pick.
So, number 2 is House of M.
Very nice choice, man. Very nice choice. All right, my number 2. So a little background to this book, and it probably affects me a little bit as to why. This book is my number 2, and it's been my number 1 for a long time, and it came down to number 2. I read comics as a child. I have a great memory of going every week to the comic store with my uncle and picking up books, and my uncle's a very passionate reader, and I wasn't a strong reader in school, so comics were introduced by him by something to try to get me to catch on to reading and enjoy it. So we'd go to the comic store every week. Well, I read all through my childhood, and then I kind of stopped in the teen years, and I became interested in a lot of different reading, and we'd go to the bookstores and stuff in my adult life, and I was trying to find something. I was in kind of a slump. I hadn't found anything to read, and I wandered through the trades and graphic novel section, and I'm like, geez, I haven't read anything in the comic world for ages. And I kind of picked up and I thumbed through, and this book I thumbed through, and I instantly, just thumbing through, said, I have to get this. I have to read this. So my number 2 pick is The Long Halloween by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale. Batman. I've been a Batman fan since as long as I can remember. The movies came out, in 1989. I was hooked on the idea of Batman ever since. I still am. And this was the introduction to me to Jeff Loeb's writing, to Tim Sale's art. I love Tim Sale's art as Batman. He's not the Iron Man Batman. He's not all armored up. It's all about him and his ability as a detective, his ability as a fighter. And this whole story surrounds a serial killer that strikes every holiday, starting on Halloween and then every holiday after. And how it's like driving Batman insane to who is this killer and trying to track them down. And what got me in the art when I flipped through was I remember my childhood stuff. I read Deadpool. I read The Punisher. I read G.I. Joe. Original G.I. Joe had some violence in it. But it was always off to the side. It was maybe a little bit of blood in a hand. It wasn't in front of you. It wasn't a murder. And this is, it is graphic. It was the first comic I flipped through that had blood and murder and, Batman inspecting bodies and being a detective trying to determine what happened at this crime scene. And it ends up involving nearly every major villain in the Batman rogue gallery. They all end up coming into it at one point or another. So if you have a favorite, you're probably going to find them in this. So The Long Halloween is one I cannot recommend enough. It spreads out. You end up with 2 more books after it that are not direct sequels, but you still get this Jeff Loeb, Tim Sale universe story. And I absolutely love them. So I highly recommend checking out Batman Long Halloween. If you're a Batman fan, if you want to try to get into Batman, the artwork, I don't know, I love it. To me, Batman, and it's one of the problems with some of it that I get of the art of Batman, is you see too much of him. And in this, Batman is the way I always envision him. He's a shadow. Mm-hmm. He's some eyes. He's a cloak. He's a little bit of a cowl. He's terrifying how he appears and disappears. The artwork to me is exactly what I want to see my Batman be. There's not tons and tons of these huge shots. He's not this giant armored up guy. He is Batman, the greatest martial artist and detective and all these things wrapped up in one. And it's not like the James Bond too many gadgets thing. Mm-hmm. So number 2, Batman Long Halloween.
I'm glad you have a Batman series. So it's funny, as we talked about the animated series or animated movies a second ago, about how Marvel's lacked in that and that DC's kind of taken away with it. I didn't realize how many Batman movies there were that were animated.
There are so many.
And so I found them, a lot of them, and so I've been trying to get into it. So it's basically told myself that's like, okay, I've been a Marvel fan for many years. I'm always going to be a diehard Marvel fan. I'm always going to give shit to people that are DC fans or mainly DC fans. But I think it's time to start opening up and reading some and exploring some DC characters. And so, and so some of those are, I mentioned Joker on our Villains podcast, and there's the idea that there is some good characters, and Batman would be one of those. I was in this, I watched all of Smallville. Smallville was an excellent TV show at the time.
Very good.
For what it was. And so the idea that I think it's time that this gives me an opportunity. And again, selfishly, one of the reasons I like doing some of these podcasts is that now I have a trade paperback that I potentially could pick up and read and get into with Long Halloween. So I appreciate that on a personal level.
I'm glad I could be here for you for all of your comic recommending needs.
And so on an honorable mention part of it, and the mention you said Long Halloween, it reminds me of, it was made into a comic book based on the podcast, but I tell you one of the, especially the word long made me think of it, is The Long Night by the Wolverine podcast. That was Marvel. It was a scripted podcast that came out on Stitcher that they ended up making into a 12 issue, I believe it was, or 6 issue, one of the two there, comic book that went along. It basically just took the words from the podcast that made it into
consolidated it to nice.
But the long part of it made me think of that, and I think it didn't make this, but it should be in my honorable mentions, that The Long Night it's Wolverine, The Long Night. It's a scripted podcast. I believe it's all available now. You get it on Apple or Spotify. And there was a follow-up on that too, that was called The Lost Trail. But The Long Night, where Wolverine is like suspected to be the killer, in this town. Like Wolverine's gone into hiding because of a bunch of things, but the long thing reminded me of that, and that's something that I wanted to mention on this podcast.
That's something
It
I've never
was
heard. I'm gonna have to check that out.
The Long Night. It was really good. So, great number 2. Definitely don't think any DC should be available in the top 5, but that's just me. So
Wow, can you feel the hate?
Number one for me is by Brian. No, just kidding. It's by Mark Miller, not Brian Michael Bendis. Another comic book series in the Marvel comic book universe that had 100+ issues in the tie-in for the series. It's Civil War. There's something about Marvel's Civil War that has always struck at me because of the fact that it brought politics into it, into a point where you think about that a lot of these comic books we listen to or read, we just talked about earlier about how it doesn't have, it's for fake. But how do
Right.
you take comic books and make them a real life issue? And it's something that X-Men's been able to do for years, and being able to say that the mutants are like races that people don't like. You know, that idea that they're always ostracized and they're always picked on and da da da. So Civil War was able to say, how do we take this to real life? How do we take this to what we think about when I watch CNN or NBC or Fox News or any of these different stations, and put it into a comic book? And they were able to do that, like, and say with the Superhuman Registration Act and the idea that it makes it, in a sense, when you think back on it, you're like, it makes sense. We should know that you have superpowers or not. Like,
Right. Yeah, you're a walking weapon.
You know, maybe not for Colossus or for Cyclops or Xavier, because they're kind of good people. But definitely for your Scarlet Witches, you people who can actually do serious harms on a grand scale. It makes sense. I understand why they would want to know who's who and so on. But then again, I see the opposite side of it, where it's like Spider-Man and protecting his family, and the fact that they're gonna tell us it's not worth going into there. Well, no, I'm gonna make that decision as a superhero whether or not I go protect those people or not. And so I see both sides of it, and it's like every time I read the series, I'm always like, I'm on Captain America's side. Oh no, next time I'm on Iron Man's side. Oh, the next time, and it over and over and over again. And even to the point where Spider-Man reveals his identity in this comic book series.
Yep.
And
to the general public, to everyone.
Again, not to give away. I mean, it's from 2006, I believe, so I'm not giving away too much. It's been 14 years.
And there's been a movie that's very loosely.
And again, I want to touch on that in a second. The idea that Spider-Man reveals his identity, but still then goes, wait, this is crap, and then switches sides. And the idea that he's like, no, Tony, you are way out of line here. And so the whole series, and it really, so House of M starts with this series at that time, and at the end of House of M, Civil War kind of comes out. Then it's Secret Invasion, and then it goes into Avengers versus X-Men, and then it goes into it goes into Siege, and then it goes into Avengers and X-Men. That whole series aligned, and that's what they're literally all connected. They all happened at the same time, and they're back to back to back to back. And I honestly will tell you right now, it is the best story arcs that Marvel's ever put out, and they haven't been able to match it. Again, King of Black's pretty good, but the idea that the idea that A, I mean, I wrote down A through E. So House of M, Civil War, Secret Invasion, the Siege, and Avengers for X-Men are literally all on a line. Basically, there's Axis in there too, which is okay, but my point is that Civil War they did a great job in the movies, except for small things like Secret War or Civil War at the very beginning of the series, just to give people an idea, is a group of young adults who have not really anybody are filming a reality TV show, which again puts it into context that I would be able to understand. And exactly. And so they, long story short, blow up a school in an area, or blow up an area, and a lot of people die. And that's what forces Tony to think about the Superhero Registration Act and so on. The one thing I will give it discredit for on the movie is, yes, a lot of people died in Civil War at the very beginning to put this into motion. But what made Tony's change his mind and push towards this and side with the Superhero Registration Act was basically that one lady with her one son
Yeah.
in the hallway. Whereas in the comic book, it was emphasized that kids died and a lot of people died.
Mm,
And to Tony, it was like it flipped the switch immediately that one person died and some lady randomly in a hallway was telling him
yeah.
about it. And he's like, okay, we've got to do something about this. And so that was the one thing where I was like, oh, that
So this
sucks.
battle happened outside of the school. It ended
Yes.
outside of the school.
Yes.
Well, the villain was
And
trying to run away. The
and
villain.
there is the aspect again, and that's another one. When you mentioned front lines, this also has a
Mhm.
front lines in it as well, which is basically what's his face? I can't even remember it. The writer. He works for the he's connected to Daredevil.
Oh, Ben.
Ben Urich.
Ben
Or
York. There you go.
yeah,
Yep, Ben York.
he is there's a frontlines episode or one that has three different parts in it. One of them is about reporters covering the Civil War and covering the
Mm.
Superhero Registration Act. Again, you're looking at non-superheroes talking about this big thing that doesn't really affect them because they're not superheroes, but it's just fascinating how they were able to intertwine that. And I haven't been able to read all 100 plus issues, but I've read quite a bit of the different shoot offs from different covers and different
All the
things.
little spin-off
And
things.
every time I read it, I feel like I read the main storyline and then I read a couple different connected storylines that go with it. Um, but it makes me think of real life, and that's what I think that's cool about it. Is like I said, we talk about fake worlds, but it's like if we had superheroes in this real world we live in,
It
Civil
would
War
be
would
like
happen.
this.
This would
Yeah,
happen.
absolutely. Yep.
And this would be
Absolutely.
something we'd have to deal with. And one of the things I think they did great with Iron Man in 2008, and one of the reasons why I think the MCU got kicked off, is they brought Iron Man to the world that we know.
Mm.
Iron Man, Tony Stark went to the Middle East
Yep.
to do this and became who he was in the Middle East. Not
Yep.
like the comic books that it was based off of, where he went to Asian countries
China.
and China
Yeah. Yeah. He went to
and the
China.
aspect that would not connect to me in any way. The Middle East
Right.
connected to me, and that's something the Civil War has always done to me. That it was like they brought it to my world that I live in, that I see on TV every single day. And it's something that's pretty cool. And it's not by Brian Michael Bendis, which really surprised me when I finished reading it.
Because it feels like Brian Michael Bendis' work.
But it's Mark Miller, and it's a great series. It's not that long. The actual one is only 6 issues, and that's one that you can pick up the trade paperbacks and
I
read
have
the
in
entire
stock right
thing
now. Yep.
and not have to read anything else that goes along with it and get the principle of it. But it's worth reading, and it might be something for you to get in. Frontlines is one of the best connected ones on that one too. Like you mentioned earlier, with
Yep.
Secret Invasion, there's also a Frontlines as well. I believe there might be in House of M too. I think a lot of these are trying to do that now, which I like.
Yeah.
Or at that time,
Give you a human aspect of it.
yes.
Somebody that.
So
Yeah. That's
so
cool.
number one is Civil War, and I don't think they killed it in the movies with it. They could have done a lot more, and I think some
They
of
could
that
have
also
done much better. Yeah.
some of it had to do with rights of characters again, because like
Again.
Wolverine would have been
Yeah.
big part of it, and Iron Man would have been big part. Sorry, man, Spider Man would have been a big part of it. There's some characters they couldn't use, so I mean, what they had to use for a roster of characters, I think they did pretty good.
So, fantastic. I actually now want to reread Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for that, because that was great. So funny one. People may not know that I don't know if I've ever said this on this podcast. I am what's left of an old hockey goalie. I played adult hockey in a men's league for about a decade and just had to hang it up. But I have always loved hockey. And also in the Civil War, I am a Captain America. I'm on Cap's side. If we split, I'm joining Cap's side. So in that, they came out with my favorite Glass Bangers is the name of the company that produces these different hockey shirts, all these crazy ones. And I'm actually wearing tonight, so it's perfect, my Captain America goalie shirt. And the Iron Man in this same set is a skater, and I'm a goalie. So I loved when I saw this shirt. I'm a Cap guy in the Civil War, and they did the Civil War Iron Man versus Cap. And I love the artwork of the shirt with Cap, instead of having the blocker, having the shield up. And this was a must-have. I absolutely love this shirt. So it was funny that I'm wearing this tonight, when you're like, Civil War is my number one. So.
And again, there's times where I think the best number ones to you on these lists are the ones that you really can't explain.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense. Like I said, the same thing with Josh on our movie lists, that there's certain movies and there's certain comic books that's just like, it has to be number one. Like there's just this going back to it over and over and over again. I own all of the single issue of that series of Civil
Yep.
War. I own the
Nice.
trade paperback. I own the Blu-ray, obviously, of the movie. I own basically. I mean, if I can get signed, if I can get, I mean, eventually, if I can get issue number 1, CGC. I mean, that's one of those ones that I'm always gonna own the entire series of. I own the entire
Awesome.
series of Civil War, House of M, Secret Invasion, Infinity Gauntlet. I actually don't even own one issue of Avengers versus X-Men. I won't lie about that. I own all the Maximum Carnage. So and I own some collected issues of Planet Hulk because I own the death of Meek and the first appearance of Korg, I believe. But yeah, so Civil War is one of those ones that I'll own any different version of that book because I
Very
just
nice.
love it so much. So
Very nice. Very nice. I'm gonna have to reread it again now to get it again. That's definitely one I would recommend. It's a great read. I'm really happy it was your number one, and I love the passion you brought to it because it really brings back to me. I want to reread it again. But I'm a Cap guy. I'm Cap all the way with it. All right, so my number one. And unfortunately, as I went to go pull it off my shelf for my personal collection and realized that a friend of mine's still borrowing it, so I had to use a different copy from the same series. My number one, this book I became obsessed with. I read the first one because I liked the principal idea of it. I thought it was a cool idea. I didn't read a lot of this character. So I went out and picked it up, and then I started buying them. I started special ordering them. I had the entire first print in hardcover. I became completely obsessed with, and you're not going to be happy with me because it's not a Marvel book. It is The Blackest Night, and unfortunately, I have the Black Lantern Corps instead of the original Green Lantern book because my friend never returned it yet. Anyway, so Blackest Night. So this is a Green Lantern story, which I love the Green Lantern. And this is a zombie story, which I love zombies because they're cool. So for those that don't know, Justin, a little bit about a little bit about lanterns. So there are numerous lanterns out there that have rings of power, right? Everybody, the Green Lantern, and is powered by will. It's your will that gives you a ring, and it's something I love about Hal Jordan is through all of the universe, which is enormous, and there are hundreds and thousands of lanterns. It is Hal Jordan, a human from Earth, that most overall the alien races look down on of being kind of useless in the grand scheme of the universe. Hal Jordan is like the greatest lantern, and it is his will that drives that. And there are numerous other rings. So you find in the Blackest Night series, there's a ring of hope. There's a ring of love. There's a ring of. Eventually, you find death, which gives you your zombies. So the villains are this zombie that is spreading across, and these black rings that are seeking out the dead. And ultimately, they're trying to take over the universe and just kill it all because death should be it. Darkness should be all that reigns. We were here first. Before life came, there was nothing. And it spreads out across the universe. And this story spreads out across the universe. As you read it, you get not just what Hal's doing and the connected characters around Hal, like Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman and all of these other characters. It actually has Scarecrow in it because fear is one of the other immediate great powers across the universe is fear. But you also get what's happening to the other lanterns across the galaxies and across the universe and what they're facing and trying to stop death in their own worlds and realms. And it's a phenomenal series. I absolutely love it. It leads to Brightest Day, which is a great read. My only Brightest Day left me a little disappointed, but it did give me my love for Aquaman. So I have to give a little thumbs up for that. It gave me my love of Aquaman. If you were like Aquaman's a joke, go read Brightest Day
Yeah.
#1. Aquaman's
Oh, you're not asking that question?
Yeah. I was always as a kid, I'm like, Namor is so much cooler than stupid Aquaman. When you read Brightest Day, you're like, Aquaman will kick Namor's ass.
Not as part of the Phoenix Five.
Okay, I'll give you his Phoenix Force moment. um, but Blackest Night goes across this entire realm. It gives you an absolute amazing feel for Wonder Woman, for Flash. It is terrifying because these rings seek out not just the dead specifically, but the dead who are affecting their enemies. So when it realizes that you are an enemy to it, it seeks out someone you loved or someone you hated or someone you had this passionate connection to, because ultimately these rings are all powered by something very strong. There's rage. The red rings are rage. And each one of these gets a connection to something very strong. So it's ultimately someone who died that you have a deep connection to, and you're facing them as this zombie form. But unlike the brainless zombies, they have all of their memories. The ring manipulates that, and you're fighting them with this deep, passionate connection. And there's some of them lose their lives because they can't fight the person they love who died. It's deep. It's dark. I cannot speak highly enough for Blackest Night.
So,
I
question:
absolutely love the series.
is Blackest Night or the Green Lantern movie better? Sorry, I just did a jab at DC
Oh
comic
man,
movies.
they are so close in comparison. All right, so
No, but
fair enough. The Green Lantern movie does not get enough props for the fact that, okay, Ryan Reynolds to me is not the Green Lantern. He's Deadpool.
no,
He was
he's
always
Deadpool.
Deadpool. He's been Deadpool since I was a little kid. He was Deadpool. When I first saw him as two guys, a girl, in a pizza place, he was Deadpool.
Yeah.
He's a smart talking ass. But he's not Hal Jordan, even close.
No.
But the Green Lantern movies, for your closeness to following a comic series that is all cosmic, it's really not a bad movie. It's just you have to love the Green Lantern to watch it and respect it, because everyone else is like, "What the hell am I looking at?"
You're just a DC apologizer. That's all you are. No, but I'm glad that
what leg do I have to stand on since Guardians of the Galaxy came out, which all takes place in space and is phenomenal, and everyone loves it. And then they watch Green Lantern, they're like, "What is this idiot talking about? Like, this is awful."
I do like how your number one was a DC book, because that's what you bring to the table that I do not
Sure.
bring to the table. And your
Yep.
top two were actually DC books, which
Yep.
is great because I love that too. So thank you for inspiring DC fans across this galaxy.
They're like, "Thank God we have someone speaking for us."
I tell you what. So what I want to do really quickly, because we're probably boring people at this point. Hopefully, if you're still listening to this point, you're really into Marvel or into comic books, which I'm really happy about. But
Yes, we're impressed with you.
I get a few beers and a couple of old dudes, and we talk comic books for a while. It's gonna take a while. And I did kind of picture going a little bit longer, because it's their storylines, not just a specific character or a specific book.
Yeah.
But I am kind of glad, and I want to bring this up now, that neither one of us picked. I will put them in the most overrated comic book story arcs. Is the Dark Phoenix saga
Oh,
and Days of Future Past. So
yeah.
both
I
of
agree.
those, I felt like I was like, oh my God, okay, obviously 9 and 10 are going to be those two. Cool. What's 8 through 1? Then I'm like, no, they don't need to be on my list. I'm tired of people talking about these two
Mm-hmm.
storylines.
Mm-hmm.
I tell you what, the Days of Future Past happens over 2 comic books in the X-Men series. It's not a story arc. It's a small story, which is great. I love it.
Which has
It's
become an obsession.
like it, love it, do what you want with it. They made an entire movie out of 2 comic books,
Yep.
not 2 comic books, 2 issues
Not a very
of
good
comic book.
movie.
And the Dark
Sorry.
Phoenix wasn't very good either. And that's just me, a hot take. Justin saying a hot take right now. I just can't get into it. And I've tried to read them in the past.
Yep.
I've read Days of Future Past. You can read in 2 seconds because it's 2 issues again, or 3 issues, one of the 2. I forget now. But it's
I want to say it's 3. I can't.
they're
Yeah.
not they're not what people like. I'm tired of people putting them on their top 10 list. Put them on a top 50 list, great. Top 25 list, great. Top 10 list, it just doesn't. They don't speak to me, and I won't. I hope I'm not making villains of myself.
Justin, COVID air high five.
Exactly. Like, it's like they're both I'm
Yes,
glad
thank
now
you.
that we ended it, and I'm glad I ended. I'll put my honorable mentions at the very end. They're really
Yep.
not honorable mentions. They're actually I put HM for horrible mentions. They're not bad, but they're just not. I just don't see them
They're
as
not
top
to
10
the
quality.
epic creation that it's lived up to now. And I
No,
agree. I have tried to read the Dark Phoenix saga I don't know how many times, and I'm like, I just can't. I just can't.
I
In
can't.
DC, which you don't know, can actually do. Crisis on Infinite Earths, I have the same problem with. It's an iconic DC series that I'm like, I have to read it. And not only do I have to read, you feel like you have to like it, right? Like I have to like this. I don't.
Nope.
I don't. I can't make it
And
through it.
one that I will potentially read just because of people doing it is Killing Joker or Killing Joke.
Killing Joke.
That I
Killing Joke
probably
is a. It's not
it's
on my list. It didn't make my honorable mentions, but it's a good solid read.
and I don't know, does it a solid read or should I just watch the animated film? Like that's my whole back and
Either
forth on it.
or,
It's like okay,
the animated film is very close. It has Mark Hamill as the Joker, which by
yeah.
the way, anytime I read, I hear Mark Hamill's voice, so it's very fair.
Well, it's funny because I'm reading, or my wife is rereading the book. It's called Thanos Mad Titan. I mentioned, I think, on a
Mm,
previous podcast.
yeah.
It also comes with these two books, or not come with it, but the Cosmic Quest Part One and Part Two. Definitely worth
Nice.
reading. But
No.
she's reading the Mad Titan, and the Thanos voice in that book is the Thanos voice that I hear because I listen to it on audiobook.
Mm.
So the guy reading it on the audiobook is the voice I hear whenever Thanos speaks in the comic books now,
I didn't love
not
the.
Josh Brolin.
Yeah, I don't love Josh Brolin as Thanos.
And
It's
so
just
it's
not.
funny how like how you hear certain things as you hear
Yeah.
Luke Skywalker as Joker. But it is, so yeah, so there's some series that are out there, but I'm just glad that, like I said, if I take anything personally away from this entire top 10 list is that neither one of us picked those two series. I was probably more aptly to put them on there because of bigger Marvel fan, or
Yep.
more of like I'm only Marvel basically.
Right.
But the idea that those comic books, I'll put them on my overrated list. They're overrated as a comic book series. I think it was pre 2000s or pre 90s really, where they
Mm-hmm.
created these comic books. It's they were what they were at the time. If you put them in each era, then yes, they're great for what they were. But
Sure,
like
for
there
what they
was
were, but
so many
they
good
don't stand up well now. They really
and,
don't.
and Avengers versus X-Men is a better series to me about the Phoenix Force than the original Phoenix Saga. So
I will
so
second that. Yep.
And so, yes, I'm glad that now that we had that out there, that we're gonna make some haters of us, but I think
Yeah,
that's
I'm
fine
sure.
because that's the whole point. And
I'm gonna have at
there's
least two people
so
boycott me
many
now.
just in Marvels. Like I said, we talked about earlier about the digital version of watching or reading Marvel on your iPad. There's 25,000 comic books on that app. They're
Mm,
bound and determined to try to pick 10 series out of that, a Marvel alone, not including anybody else. And so it's not hard to not put those in the top 10, in my opinion.
agreed.
So,
Yep, agreed.
but I wanted to show off one quick thing before we get to the top 10 there. I forgot I have, it's hard to see because my ring, but look at my new,
Oh, nice.
it's a silicone wedding band that I
Very
use
nice.
for when I put it on for tonight's podcast. But it's I use it for my like lift kegs, or if I go to camp and I don't want to lose my wedding ring, I bought it for
Yeah,
like
that's
on Groove
awesome.
Life. It's awesome. So,
That's cool.
so let's do our top 10 list countdowns, and we'll wrap this up before we go forever. So, 10 for me. So 10 through 9. I'm just gonna read them off. So Siege by Marvel, The Walking Dead's Made to Suffer, Planet Earth by Planet Earth, yeah, that's good too. But Planet Earth, Planet Hulk by Marvel, Maximum Carnage on Marvel, and then The Walking Dead All Out War for number 6. Number 5 through 1 are all Marvel, so I'm not going to say Marvel every time, but it's Avengers versus X-Men, Infinity Gauntlet, Secret Invasion, House of M, and Civil War. A couple of throwouts there that I'll put on there before you get into yours. The 2013 Infinity comic book series by Jonathan Hickman, great series. And again,
Mm,
the Long
I
Night
agree.
Wolverine podcast and the series that goes along with it
I gotta check that out.
are things that you should probably check. Also, Marvel's Disassembled, Avengers Disassembled, is worth going into as well. So
Nice. All right, so I've got Spider-Verse from the Marvel Universe, Identity Crisis from DC, Secret Wars, the Doom era, would you say 2015? from the Marvel Universe. Guardians of the Galaxy's Black Vortex. I Hate Fairyland, which I believe is an Image comic series by Scotty Young. Which I honestly had a very hard time not having that in my top 5. I over and over again tried to drop something so I could have it in my top 5, but I just couldn't do it. Spider-Man Blue in the Marvel Universe. I have Planet Hulk from the Marvel Universe. I have Nail Biter, which is I'm gonna have to double check that. I want to say it's an Image series. Shame on you. Yeah, I think it is. Yes, it is Image. So, Nail Biter by Image Comics. Long Halloween, which is DC, and The Blackest Night, which is DC.
So I
noticed that you didn't have a single DC book there, Justin.
Weird, huh?
Weird.
And it's funny because, like, if you think about when you do series arcs like this, or stories or comic book events, when you read more one of one manufacturer, more publisher, then you're gonna get that over and over again. And again, it's my love for Marvel and the way they've done things over the years. I think if we did this list again in 5 years, there probably would be other ones that sneak into that the 10 through 6 kind of thing.
Half of mine were Marvel. I think I figured out, right?
Well, I feel like they're also like the movies. I think they do a great job with the comic book arcs, like the events, the stories. Again, 40% of mine were by the same author, but it's that aspect of it, and it makes sense. I mean, if it makes sense, then when we go to do authors or writers, where do you think he's going to be on that list?
Yeah, right. Well, you know what's funny is I think we only had one cross, which is Planet Hulk, right?
Yeah, Planet Hulk. Yep.
Yeah, that's the only one that.
I think there's certain ones where there's so many of them, like you're just trying to get that. And if you think if we did Marvel story arcs, I guarantee you there'd be more crossovers. Or if we did just DC or just whatever, you'd have that. Or what I'd love to do, and I was just thinking about as we were doing this, is I'd love to do not story arcs, just comic book titles. It could be anything, it could be whatever, that are not part of the top 2. So not DC or Marvel. So you're talking Image, IDW, Boom,
right,
so forth,
right,
and try to do a top 10 list that doesn't include, and that obviously more difficult for me. But and obviously Image and IDW are pretty big publishers, but just the idea that the top 2 are so far above it.
I almost feel like Boom is on their way to passing IDW at this stage.
It could be, and if IDW does more things like The Last Ronin, then they won't be. But yes, but yeah. There was talk about Brian Michael Bendis working with Boom as well, which would be freaking.
That'd be fascinating.
Bringing powers over from Marvel to DC to Boom and having powers come out. So that would be also a great series if anybody wants to read about Brian Michael Bendis' powers. A limited edition TV show if you can find it. I don't even know where you can find it now because it was on the PlayStation Network. It doesn't exist anymore.
I'll say I've never seen it.
I have it and I downloaded it not on the legal side of it. And it was hard. I'll tell you what, it was hard to find it legally.
Right.
So try finding it legally.
You find it legally, and Justin will buy it. He promises.
It baffles me that he sold it to the PlayStation Network on an idea that they were going to be successful on a network that was only available on PlayStations. But
maybe at some point, PlayStation.
Powers is a good one. It reminds me a lot of Heroes. The idea that it's normal people with powers and they don't have superhero names. It's that aspect of it. So worth reading, worth watching, if you can find it. But sweet. Are you happy with your list?
I'm very happy with my list. Notable mentions, if you want to cover those.
Yes.
So I had Siege, so we covered that one anyway. So we would have had that swap. Flashpoint, which I'm sure you've read over and over again, based on the fact it's a DC book. But that's an awesome series. Kind of a what if DC universe. There's a Batman that comes from that universe that is amazing, and that's a series that I could not put down. And thankfully they're finally coming out with an omnibus style too, which I will be putting in my personal collection. I've been waiting for that. And my other one is a Marvel book, Fear Itself, which I was surprised you didn't have on there.
There's certain ones that people put on their list that they're good, but Fear Itself, Original Sin, there's a lot of them that are out there that are really good that it didn't speak to me. I don't know.
See, and it's funny because Fear Itself, I loved, and I had my top 10 originally, and then it kind of just kept, as I kept adding things, it kept dropping. But it's a notable book to me that it overall was not well received, particularly. I think it was it Matt Faction wrote that, if I remember correctly?
Mm-hmm.
His name?
Yeah.
But it's a kind of an ultimate evil gets discovered from Asgard, and it spreads across the Marvel Universe, and it takes over whomever it kind of wants. and it is, to me, I absolutely love that story. And if this was a Marvel only story, they would be in my top 10. I absolutely, I really enjoyed it. It took me forever to find it because it was out of print. It's not a particularly easy hardcover to find or trade to find, and I really, really enjoyed it. I was surprised at how much I enjoyed Fear itself. So that's one I would recommend to anybody if you can come up with a copy of it.
And so like, that's my point. There's a couple that were really good that I mean, I could obviously go on and on and on with Marvel series, but Fear
We could
itself
do
was a
this
great
for
one.
hours, I'm sure.
Original Sin, again, a good one around the same time. And again, it's this time of like early 2000s to 2015 that Marvel was kicking ass at comic book events, and then
Oh,
they
it's
haven't really done
huge.
much since then, in my opinion. So Access
Yeah.
is another good one. There are some good ones out there that are worth reading. There's some that are based specifically on the X-Men universe or just on the Avengers stuff, and there's,
Yep.
I mean, the one I mentioned about Standoff, a great one. Again, it's there's some good series to read. Honestly, Wikipedia is your friend. If you just Google like DC's comic book events, they'll put them in order, where to read them, when to read them, how to find them, all that stuff. And your local comic book shop, if you live in the Bangor area, Paul's gonna be able to find it in some way. I mentioned Colton earlier from work. He's gonna get
Yep.
the House of M. He wants to read
Which
that. I mentioned to him
is
today.
mind blowing to me. Why the hell is that not in print? Diamond? What are you doing to me? You have
And
WandaVision out and House of M is not in print.
and
But
then
I have
Avengers
Colton, if
Disassembled
you're
would be the
listening,
other
I have
one.
already found your copy. I've got it. It's actually at the store now.
So the that, and then the Avengers Disassembled and all that stuff. Like, there's just a bunch of stuff that would be really good for them to have put into one freaking book. But I guess
Yeah.
maybe they didn't do it because they didn't want people to assume that it came from. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know what they do.
It would have been good to put out not as advertised, but just be like, oh, we have it, like that kind of thing.
Right.
Like
You
we
at least have it
reprinted it.
available. At least have it in print right now.
But yeah,
I
so
mean, if nothing else, Scarlet Witch is a character you think people would be more interested in with WandaVision out, and in that case, this is her biggest story arc.
And I'm still surprised that some things they haven't done comic books that match up with the movies more either. Meaning that, like, not even like, even if you put it in its own quote unquote universe, if you did an MCU style comic book, so it's like a comic book that relates to the movies, you know what I mean? That you have to like, it could be the movies in comic book form. Right. I don't care if it was literally Endgame, but in a 12-part issue that you had to read in a physical print. Someone drew it. And I'm surprised that doesn't exist, because there's times where I'm sitting in bed and I have the app open and I'm like, oh, that would be a badass to just read the Endgame movie over. I can't read it; I have to watch it, and so that's something I feel like they missed in a sense. Like you could put it out just digitally. You didn't have to print it on print copies, or just in trade pad. But yeah. So another good top 10 list. This is Paul's idea of doing story arcs, comic book events. We'll do something different next. I thought about doing a co-podcast with you and Josh to do top 10 comic book related movies. And then I'd have to put myself with like 60% could be Marvel. We'd have to cap me because it'd be 10 Marvel movies. But there are some good comic book imprint movies. So movies that are based on imprints of comic books that I would probably put in my list, that I would be fair and honest about it and say that there probably would be 10 comic book movies in it. But what I'd like to do is wait on that one so that you and me and Josh should either hang it at your shop or at the Queen City Cinema Club and do it in person. And maybe do it as a live stream so that we can get people involved in it and stuff like that. So we'll wait on that one.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
I don't want to put too far out there, but we'll figure out what the next one will be between Paul and I. We'll do something fun. It will be something shorter. We just, it's just, we could talk comic books forever. We could do a Joe Rogan 4-hour podcast. Yeah. So it's 2 hours in, but we didn't press record for a little while. So I'm wondering if we're actually going to hit the 2-hour mark or not. But, so yes, Galactic Comics, Hammond Street, Bangor. Galactic Comics on Facebook, on Instagram. They have a website. At some point, you'll be able to buy comic books online from Paul.
Coming soon. We're working on digital inventory now. It may be in the summer before you can really get individual things, but we're getting there. It's a lot of work, folks. It's a lot of work.
And then you can find obviously this podcast on YouTube. This is one of those ones that I do like the idea of putting it on YouTube because there is some visual aspects to it. So if you have a chance to watch it, watch it. If not, and you're in your car on the way to work or to where Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, Google Podcast, wherever you find it, justanotherpodcast.com. Like us, review us, share us, do what you can. It helps both myself, it helps Paul because Paul's an independent business owner. COVID has been crazy. Paul luckily has been doing pretty well, but he's
Yeah.
still a small business in his first year of business, and the COVID crap hit at the same time. So I'm glad. What you just passed the year, right?
Yeah, November. Yeah, we
So
passed a year in
so
November.
so it's nice. So you're into the second year.
Yep.
We want our goal as Paul's fans of himself personally and the comic book shop is to make this Paul's only job. So at some point
Hopes and
we'll make that
dreams, man.
happen. And
Hopes and
not that
dreams.
he doesn't love his actual job. He loves that place. It's given him the life he has now. But let's give him his dream. Let's give him his dream. If you're in the
Yeah.
Bangor area listening to this or watching this, go buy a graphic novel, go buy a comic book, go buy a pop vinyl, some Pokemon cards, whatever you can at Galactic Comics in Bangor. That's my pitch
Appreciate
for you,
it.
man. He did
Thanks,
not
buddy.
pay me for that. He did not do anything like that. I just think my friend Brian went to a different comic book store today, and I told him to start going to Galactic Comics. So
I appreciate it. Thanks for the support.
but so Galactic Comics again, Paul, I really appreciate it. We'll get this done so we can go see our wives and live our normal lives. He's open. This is obviously going to come out on a Wednesday, so he's opening Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Check him out online. Galactic Comics again, Paul. Thank you so much, man. I find a better partner to talk comic books with than you. I look forward to this every couple of months that we do this, and I look forward to the next one.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, man.